Satin Path selected here, you are going to see that you have a pattern. Again, the original pattern was satin. Again, that's when you use a Satin Path, that's the default. But again, you can switch that to anything in your drop-down. And like we said, this is our standard patterns. The one up here, we actually changed standard to our carved tile. So you can see that in the drop-down. And again, in the carved tile option, you can go up to the carved tile pattern box and select your pattern from there. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any other questions before we start something new? Okay, so we are going to jump into our next stitch type. Our next stitch type is our complex fills. Again, with our complex fills, they really are a series of multiple short stitches that sew back and forth in order to cover a large area. They are commonly used for large or complex pieces. They are going to lay completely flat to the garment, and oftentimes they are giving you a much higher stitch count, anywhere from 2 to 3 times as much as the satin did. With your complex fill, you will only get one angle line. So whether or not that object is straight or curved, all of the stitches will only go in one direction. So if you're looking at your art and deciding whether or not something should be a complex fill, again, a complex fill is something you would draw with a can of spray paint. Now, the actual term complex fill is not just a stitch type, but actually a process that the computer itself is doing. So when you are drawing your shape, you're going to have that one start, your one stop point, your one angle. And if the system has to break that into multiple pieces to accomplish that task and put running stitches in there, it will do that. So if we just jump right back into our software, I'm going to create another new file. So here's our complex fill tool. You can see you can put in straight points, you can put in curved points. It can be as bizarre a shape as you want. O to close, hit the enter key. You get one start, one stop, and one angle. Now, if we come over here to our draw ribbon and we watch this, so you can see it's starting where our start point is. See how it just did a running stitch over there? So it's going to do a run to get to that next piece. So if it has to break it apart and put running stitches in between there, it's going to do this automatically. So it's breaking that shape apart and putting in those running stitches automatically. So I'm going to create 2 more of these so we can look at the pattern options that we have. So these are the same standard patterns that we had previously. So it does default to pattern 1, but again, you can see this is in standard, and these are the standard patterns here. You also have the opportunity to change standard to carved tile. So again, the same thing. When you go to that carved tile pattern box, you can select from any of these patterns that you wish. And then you also can go in and select programmed. So with that program tool, this is now going to be a programmed fill pattern. So you can come in here and select from any of the patterns that are listed here. Once you've done that, you can also change the pattern size. So these are meant to be open patterns. So see how these are open? So you can change these. So obviously the bigger this pattern is, the more of a hole that you're going to see. But again, you're meant to see through that programmed stitch. So let's go ahead and look at creating a complex fill with a hole. So we're going to create another new file over here. I'm going to go into image load. And let's come over here to our shapes and letters. So once we come over here with our shapes and letters, actually let's change, let's go back here. Let's bring that back up. I don't know what's going on with that. See if we can bring our art back up. Yeah, we may need to reboot this. This is starting to act up a little bit. Here, let's hit our show for a minute. Nope, it's still coming up that way. Oh, there we go. All right. So what we're going to do here is we are going to start with this one at the bottom. So when you do a complex fill or any shape with a hole, you are always going to digitize the outside of your shape first, and you have to hit O to close. Once you hit O to close, then you're going to start working on the different holes. So for instance, I'm going to come here to our complex fill tool. I'm going to select my color. I'm going to start drawing my shape. O to close. Now I'm going to start putting in the holes. So you have to come in here and close each of the holes for this to work. O to close. So you're going to create each one of those individual objects. O to close. Let's do our last hole over here. O to close. Hit the Enter key. Tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. And you've got your shape with holes. So even if you wanted to do the same thing with a Satin Path, it would be the same technique. You'd go to your Satin Path, you would select your color. We're going to go around the outside of our shape. O to close. O to close. Hit the Enter key. And now we're going to go in and put in our multiple angle lines for our Satin Path. So that's how you would go ahead and put in your holes. Does anyone have any questions on that before we jump into our next topic? So our next topic is actually going to be our automatic applique tool. So before we jump into our automatic applique tool, does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, so we are going to get into our automatic applique tool. So I'm going to bring up an image. So it is not that we could not do appliques before we had an automatic tool. We could absolutely do an applique before, but we actually had to digitize 3 different sections. So we would actually have to digitize a running stitch that's going to be used to tell us where to lay down a pre-cut piece. Then we would have to digitize a stitch to tack that down. And then we would have that finishing stitch, which is what you're actually viewing when you look at it. So what the automatic tool is doing is it is allowing you to come in and do it all in one step. So I can come in here with my applique tool. I can pick a color. I'm going to start plotting my points just like I would with anything else. So I'm going around my shape. O to close. Hit the Enter key. So if I zoom in here, you're going to see that I've got all of those lines that came in at one time. So let's come over here to our Applique Properties. So first of all, I'm going to start to turn some of this off so you can see the individual sections. So I'm going to leave on my Run Positioning Stitch. I'm going to turn off the Tack Down, and I'm going to turn off the applique border. So if I look at this, see where the red dots are? Those are the points I actually plotted. Now the default does have it offsetting that to the inside by 0.03. I actually want to make sure that my piece lines up exactly. So I tend to go in and make that 0. So that way, whatever my piece size is, it's going to match up exactly. Now that line that you see coming out, so see the line that's coming out here, as well as where your start and stop position is? That's what they call your frame outline. So what would happen with that is it would actually go in, push the frame towards you so that when you go to glue your piece down, you're not reaching underneath the needles. Some people like it to do that, but again, see how it's kind of throwing off the center of my design because it adds that frame out as part of the overall design size. So if you don't want it to do that, you can come in here and instead of saying just the regular stop command, you can say stop without a frame out. It's not going to do that frame out, and it's going to make the design start and stop point dead center of the overall design. Now I can come in here and turn on my tack down. So with my tack down stitch right now, it's doing a running stitch tack down. If you don't want to run, some people like to actually have a zigzag tack down. So here's your zigzag. If you want to make that wider, again, you can come in here and make those stitches wider. If you were doing this on a sewing machine, this is what a lot of people would do on their sewing machine is they just zigzag around that and they're done. So if you wanted to have that look like it was done on a sewing machine, then you could leave it this way. You can also, instead of a zigzag, change this to an E-stitch. A lot of our quilters were doing this stitch by hand. So if you want that to look this way, you could just have it do this and you might be done with it. Now, if you want to add that extra running stitch tack down and then put on the heavy applique border, you can do that also. So I just turned on that heavy steel border. If you want that steel border to look more like a zigzag, you can take density out. So if I type in that -52, that's giving me that zigzag look. I can also, instead of a steel, I can come in here and make that an E-stitch. I can also come in and make it a programmed running stitch. So just like we had those same programmed patterns when we were doing the fill a minute ago, I can actually come in here and use that as a running stitch to tack down my applique. So when you look at this, as far as the stitch out goes, so if I were to come in here and look at that print preview, you're going to see it's going to sew that running stitch, and that's going to show you where to lay that piece of pre-cut material. It's going to put a stop code in there. So again, on your machine, you're going to need to tell it to stop between color changes. So once your machine stops, you're going to glue your piece down, hit start, and then it's going to come in here and finish up that shape. Now, for those of you who might have cutters, so some of you might have a Roland cutter, a Gerber cutter, and you want to create a vector line that you can cut with. So again, remember we have unlimited back and forth as long as it's digitized the same way. I can come in here and change it to a different stitch type. So in this case, I'm going to actually copy this to the clipboard. I'm just going to go ahead and say paste after. So over here, this is an applique right now, but I can go into my drop down and make this an applique cut line. So an applique cut line is just a vector line that's using that original set of points that I created. So if I needed to go in and export it, I can go File, Export, and Applique Cut Line. And you can see it's going to be able to save that as a DXF, a PLT, an HPG, or an HPGL format. So whichever one of those your cutter has the capability of reading, you can save it that way and then be able to cut those pieces out on your cutter. This can be saved with the design and it doesn't throw anything off or add anything to it other than saving that line for you to use for cutting later. Again, it's a vector line, so it's actually going to be ignored by the software. So it's not going to look for it to be anything. It's not going to have a start and a stop point or anything like that. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Yes, if you want your tack down, so if you come in here and you want your tack down to be a zigzag, you can absolutely do that. So if you want a zigzag tack down, I can come in here instead of a run. I can change that to a zigzag, so it's doing a zigzag tack down and then coming back over that with the actual programmed run. Oh, so you don't want, let's see, tack down. So if you, yeah, you can just uncheck these. So whatever you don't want it to do, you can have it just not do it. Just uncheck or check any of the things that you want or don't want it to sew. Does anyone have any other questions on that? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we are going to go into some of our digitizing tips. Let's see. Before we jump into that. Right, so if you're just using a tack down with a zigzag, so again, that run positioning stitch, that you're just going to have that. That's just your regular line. And then you have your zigzag. So you can turn on or off any of those that you don't want to stitch. So that's something you can definitely play with to match up to some of the things you're already doing. But again, it has all three of those options here. So it's up to you to decide which ones to turn on or turn off based on other designs that you may have already created or had created for you. So let's jump into some of our digitizing tips. And a lot of these we've already discussed. We're going to kind of reiterate some of those and then jump into a design from beginning to end. So what you're going to want to do is analyze that artwork before you begin digitizing. And definitely be realistic in those expectations. We were discussing the minimums and maximums of some of your stitch types. So if something's not meeting a minimum, you're not going to be able to do it that way. Or you may have to make the whole design larger to accommodate that type of a stitch. So in order to know what stitch type something's going to be, you're going to need to know the final size of your design. Without knowing that, there's no way for you to pick the correct stitch types. It may help you at the very beginning to go ahead and physically make yourself a printed copy so that you can look at it or possibly even use a ruler to measure out some of the lines when you're trying to decide what stitch type something can be. The cleaner those lines are, the easier it's going to be for you not only to see them, but to zoom in and zoom out and still get the detail without them breaking up. So just remember that you're really going to need to recognize all of the shapes and lines in your design. So try and avoid taking those business cards or even something that you just download off the internet, because those images are actually saved really small. And then attempt to really blow them up, because you're going to see that those pixels are going to break apart and you're not going to see a straight line anywhere on your design. You're also going to need to know what fabric something's going to go on. So you're going to have to know, is this going on a knit? Is this going on a cap? Again, you're going to have to know even something like a cross grain. If you're doing a cross grain sweatshirt, normal grain lines go up and down. When a cross grain sweatshirt is used, the grain lines go left to right. So obviously if you run your angle lines the same way you would have on a regular sweatshirt, it's going to pull totally differently. Same thing with a corduroy. A corduroy, again, obviously that wale of the corduroy goes up and down. You don't want your stitch direction that exact same way so that it falls into the cap. So knowing these things is going to help you to select the correct settings, whether it just be the correct underlay type or the angle that your design is, the actual angle of the stitches your design is sewing at. If you're sewing on a cap, again, all your cap designs, you want to start whatever is closest to the bill of the hat first, and all your lettering should sew from the center out. So again, make sure that you're doing that, otherwise you're not going to get a good quality cap design. When at all possible, place running stitches between areas that's going to later be covered up by another stitch. That's going to keep your machine moving. So you don't want to have trims everywhere. If you can travel between objects, you're going to want to do that. So just remember, if your customers ask for anything specific, make sure it's something you can actually do. Again, does your artwork look finished? And especially, are the widths of the columns wide enough to create the size or stitch type that you are trying to do? So just remember, a successful digitizer is always going to allow for a learning curve. You may still need to have your more difficult designs digitized by an outside source, and this is completely normal. You're going to want to spend time practicing, have realistic expectations, and view your designs as basic shapes. So we're going to actually walk through our design from beginning to end. So we're going to start a new file. So I'm going to start a new file. Your homework design is actually going to be for a knit. So I'm going to pick a sweatshirt over here and hit finish. Again, I'm going to bring up my image. I can go in and bring out those guidelines. Because again, I'm not going to actually digitize where it says the word sailboat. So now I can go into Backdrop Select, right click. I can go to Reference Tool. I'm going to put a point here, a point here, a point here. I can type in my size, hit resize. So it just resized that portion to exactly what I wanted it to be. I can go up here to View, Remove All Guidelines. So what we want to do is in the chat box, we want to have you list what you think is going to sew first, what you think is going to sew second, what stitch types they're going to be. So again, let's go ahead and have everyone put their thoughts in the chat box. Does anybody know what's going to sew first? Yes, the yellow inside part of that sun, and that's going to be a complex fill. Yes, then it's going to jump over, and you're going to want to do the sun rays, and those are satin paths. Does anybody know what's going to come next? Yes, you can look on the handout and you would see the order. So yes, in your handouts, you're going to see the order. But again, without looking at your handout, yes, you're going to do that pink inside part of that large sail after you've done all of your orange rays and that circle around the sun. So you've done all of those orange pieces as satins. You're going to do a fill stitch for the inside part of the large sail, followed by its border. So that is correct. And we're doing that border so that we don't have anything shifting on us. If we were to do both pinks and then both purples, there's a good chance on some of our knits that it might pull apart because it's going to shift. So once it does that two pinks and then you go to sew this purple border, this may be fine. After it's sewing that border and you come back over to do this one, it may have shifted so that border doesn't line up over here. So we're going to actually do pink, purple, pink, purple. So again, our pink is fill, our purple is going to be a satin. Then, right, we're going to get into the green fill of our boat, followed by the mast and the border. The mast and the border are going to be satins. Then we have our satin blue water. And then we have our clouds. So yes, that is definitely what we are doing. So just remember, as you are working, you want to make sure you have overlap because you don't want to have all of those pieces separating. If you were to just butt this up right against the orange, there's a chance that that could separate. So we're going to take our complex fill. Again, you can pick your color. You're going to start placing your points, but again, they're inside. So you want to give yourself some overlap here. O to close, hit your enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and your angle. So this is actually where your start lock is going to go, but we're not going to have to lock it again till we're ready to trim and go to the next color. Now we can use some of our other tools. So we actually have an AutoTrace. So you can AutoTrace with your stitch type. Now what you have to watch out for with AutoTrace though is it's going to stop wherever it sees another color. So there are some times that AutoTracing pays and sometimes it doesn't. But I can definitely trace these rays. So if I hit my Satin Path, hit T for trace, I'm going to left click on top of a ray, hit the enter key, tell it start, stop, put in my angles. Now I definitely still need overlap, but it's really easy for me to come over here to my Vertex Select tool, grab those end points and move them in. So if I only have to move a couple points, then yes, in this case, coming in and auto tracing that made that quite easy. I didn't have to draw that. Then I need to come up here and remember to change this to the other color, because remember, auto trace is going to trace exactly what it sees. So you just want to try and keep your colors together when you start to auto trace. I'm going to come back over here to my running stitch, and I'm going to start to add a run between the two yellow rays. I can come back here, left click on a ray, hit the enter key, put in my angles. For those of you who like shortcuts, N is your Vertex Select tool. You can grab those points, move them in, generate. You can always go back in and add an extra angle line if you feel you need one. I'm going to grab my running stitch, go to my next ray, left click, hit the enter key, you can grab your Vertex Select tool, bring in your overlap, you can put in your angles. Again, N is your Vertex Select tool. There we go. G for generate. D is your direction line or angle line. So definitely remember, some of those shortcuts are going to make your job a lot quicker. So here's our last satin path in that color. Left click, hit the enter key. Bring these points in. So this is where our end lock is going to go and our trim. Now we really can't auto trace this, because what's going to end up happening with this is it's not going to just auto trace each ray separately, which is what we want. It's going to connect everything together, It's going to go around all of these other colors. So we're going to just draw those ourselves. So we're going to come over here to our Satin Path, hit our Q, which brings us back into Quick Draw. We're going to draw our ray. O to close. Hit the Enter key. So this is where our start lock is going to go. And again, we're not going to have to lock it again until we go to our next color. So we're going to run over to the next ray, get our Satin Path, O to close, so this is why you're traveling, so you don't have to go in and trim those. O to close, hit the Enter key. O to close. O to close. Let's get that Satin Path. And again, remember that letter O we did? So that's what we're doing here. So we're going around the outside of this. O to close. Going around the inside. O to close. Hit the Enter key. Tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. Put in your angles. Hit your Generate. Again, this is where our end lock and our trim go. So then we're going to get our complex fill. We are going to get the pink. So now make sure you've got overlap here. O to close, hit the Enter key. Oh yeah, it would help that we do the right stitch type. But remember, you have unlimited back and forth. I can go here to convert to a complex fill. I didn't have to redraw that. So that's what makes that tool really nice. Because if you needed to change it, you can easily do it. So this is going to have its own lock stitches and trim. So your basic lock is doing a bow tie. Your line lock stitch is doing just a line that goes back and forth over itself. So now I can come over here and get my Satin Path. I'm going to grab my color. Again, I've got a piece here that I need to do. O to close, hit the Enter key. So this is where our start lock is going to go. Then we're going to get our running stitch. We're going to run down to here. O to close, hit the Enter key. I'm going to get that satin again. Start going around the outside. So we're coming around this way, up and around this direction to make our final pass over here. O to close, hit the Enter key. Again, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. Again, come in and put in your angles. Yes, I turns off your image. X turns off your stitches. So yes, those shortcuts and everything are actually in your help menu. You can actually print the entire list. So this is where my end lock is going to go and my trim. So now I can come in and get my complex fill, pick my color. Again, I need overlap. So make sure you've got that overlap going around here. O to close, hit the Enter key, start, stop, angle. This is where you're going to put in your lock stitches because that's an entity all by itself. Now with this one, you could, if you wanted to auto trace this border, you could. So if I went to satin, hit T for trace with holes because you need to see the inside and the outside portion of the line, hit the Enter key. The only thing I will tell you is if you are going to use AutoTrace and you're going to use that color, again, you're going to have to make sure you go back and change it. So let's put in our lock stitches and our trim first. Now if you hit minus, remember that is close all. I can select this, select color 17 out here. All right, if you look at it in 3D, here's your line there. So we can get our complex fill. Pick our color. O to close, hit the Enter key. This is where we can go in and put in our lock stitches. going to come over here and go back to our quick draw. I'm going to draw this because remember it's going to hit the other piece and it's too close to that orange. So it actually wants to grab the orange with it. O to close, hit the enter key. So this is where our start lock is going to go. Again, this is so close, I'm not going to trim that. O to close, hit the enter key, start, stop, put in your angles. This is where our end lock is going to go and our trim. We're going to go get that Satin Path. We are going to grab our color. We're going to draw this wave. O to close, hit the enter key. This is where your start lock is going to go. And we don't have to put in our end lock till we're ready to trim and go to the next piece. O to close. O to close. Here's our last wave. O to close, hit the enter key. This is where our end lock is going to go and our trim. Now we can trace these. So let's say we're going to trace these clouds. Again, you can actually use your pen tool or your Satin Path. Let's say we're going to use our pen tool and do it really quick. So we're going to use our pen tool, T for trace, left click, enter, left click, enter. So you're hitting left click and hitting enter. Again, that just created vector art out of that. So now I can actually just come in here and say equals Satin Path. No, I did not. I deliberately didn't put in any of my locks and trims because they're all going to have exactly the same setting, so I'll do it at the end. So you need at least one angle line in order to get a satin. So I can select all of these at once. Lock stitch, trim. So here's my design. Again, if I put that into my sew clock, let's turn off my design. You can auto trace any stitch type. So you can auto trace a complex fill, a satin path, applique. The only thing you have to kind of watch is going to be how the artwork is created. Because if it's not created, like if you auto trace a line, then it can be an applique or a run or a steel. If you are selecting solids, then it can be a complex fill or a satin path. Does anyone have any other questions before we jump into our next new topic, which is going to get into a little bit of our importing vectors. All right. Right. Before we do that, we're going to get into some of that advanced editing first. So let's just jump into a new page. So as far as some of that advanced editing goes, let's go ahead and just make a shape. Go to close, hit the enter key. So just remember that your pen tool is going to give you a piece of vector art. Okay? So if we come in here to that Vertex Select tool, you actually have your drag anchor path. So instead of being on one of the points, so you don't have to be on a red point, you could actually come in and just be on a side and start pulling it in. Again, once you have that created, again, remember equals a complex fill, and we have our shape. Everybody with us on that? So that is your drag anchor path. So it's allowing you to drag in the middle of something. Now, as far as that one-click conversion, Again, the one-click conversion is a little bit different than the convert, because instead of actually even having to go to convert, I can right-click on a tool. If I want that to be a steel, I can right-click on it. It's going to turn it into a steel. I can right-click on a run. It's going to turn it into a run. So that is your one-click conversion. Then we have our combine and reflect. So let's say that again, let's go with our pen tool for a minute. So I'm going to draw technically half of my shape. So if I come up here under reflect, what I can do is I want to reflect this to the right. So I want the heavy dark line on the right, and I can go to combine and join and close my shape. So it's gone ahead and done just that. So you could draw in some circumstances half of a shape, go to your combine and reflect. It's going to flip it, as well as in our case, because we said to close it, it's closed that path. Again, with it selected, remember you've got that one-click conversion. I can right-click and make it whatever stitch type I want it to be. So those are some of the, what they're calling advanced editing tools. So what we want to do next is jump into our vector import. So I'm going to go and create another new file. So when we're going into our vector import, first of all, if you're going to use the actual tool, so you're going to come in here and you're going to import artwork. So that's allowing you to import a vector image. So if you're going to do that, what you're going to have if you're going to use that tool is a low-level vector file. So it's going to have to be an AI version 8 or below, a CDR version 5 or below. Otherwise, you would have to have, for instance, Adobe Illustrator, and you'd have to copy and paste that vector from Adobe into a new Pulse window. So if you're not going to have a low-level vector file, you can copy and paste directly out of the art program. But just remember, when you are bringing it in, everything has got to be converted to curves. And you can't have what is considered like, well, we would call it like a multiple stitch type, but in the art world, you can't have a complex shape. So if you add a contour outline around something in your art program, that would have to be broken apart in order to bring it in here and have it work. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my imports, and you should have in your folder, just remember in your materials folder, you are going to have this turtle we're going to work with. So I'm going to come down here and get my turtle. I'm going to click on open, left click to place it, hit the enter key. So first of all, I'm going to change my background color so I can even see this. So vector lines themselves can be resized. There is no stitches here. You can make these any size that you want. So if I want to select these and I want to come over here and make this 3 inches, I can make this 3 inches. Now, another thing that I happen to like to do is to come in here under shape and remove the fill color so I can see everything that might be behind here. So these are still going to grab the color, but again, I don't have to worry about seeing things that are underneath. So I'm going to take that first line, and because this is a vector line, remember what we can do? Remember, one-click conversion? Right-click. It's going to make that into a complex fill. Now, we do have that other new tool, which is your create boundary. So before we do that, let's put in our lock stitches and trims. So to put a border around this, I can actually go in, right-click, auto, create boundary. Again, I want the distance to be 0 because I want it to ride right along that line. I want an outline, and I want it to be a steel stitch. Again, you can always preview it if you're not sure. And then I'm going to click on OK. And it's just put in a steel border for me. Okay, so again, if you want that to be a running stitch border, you could do that. So again, select that steel stitch, right-click on your digitizing tool, and it is going to allow you to create whatever border type you want that to be. Okay, so again, select it, right-click, which is your one-click conversion, and then you can go in this case, put in our lock stitches and trims. So let's go ahead and select this piece, right-click, again, I can select this, right-click, and I am deliberately, yes, leaving off my lock stitches and trims because you're going to see that in a minute. So I'm going to select these vector lines. So some of this is giving you quite a shortcut for completing your task. So now what I can do is select all of that color, go into my properties in the flyout this time, and I'm going to go underneath that connections tab, and I've got Smart Connect, so I'm going to set the trim at setting. So if I set the trim at setting, if the distance is at least 0.12, it is going to put in a trim, and then I can have it put in my lock stitches. Everybody with me? Now you could select this whole thing if you choose to. And if you right click, remember I didn't apply a style ahead of time. I can always apply a style later. So let's say this is going on my sweatshirt. So it's going to put in all of my underlay, my pull compensation. So that's going to be obviously the benefit of working with a vector file. So with working with a vector file, I can quickly create my design because someone else has done all of that drawing that we were doing on that other design. It can do that for me. I also have the capability of coming in and bringing in my true types a different way. So when I come in to import true type from here, the biggest difference between doing it here and doing it through your text tools is that in some cases, some of your fonts have the capability of having bold. So see, you've got bold, you've got the ability to slant them. So whichever options are in the true type itself, those are only going to show up when you're in the import true type from the flyout here. So let's say I use this one. Again, it's asking me what I want it to be. I'm going to have it be a Satin Path. I can bring this over here, left click, hit the Enter key. Again, it is coming in here and doing an auto digitize with this. So if for some reason you don't like the way it does something, you can come in and add in your virtual slices and any of those things that are going to be used. So again, you can hit U as your virtual slice. You can come in and put in your virtual slices. You can hit your angle line tool and just make sure that you change any of the angle lines that might need to be changed or deleted. Same thing over here on your M. So again, U is your virtual slice. We're going to put one here. We're going to put one here. We're going to put one here. Then you go to your direction lines. Same thing that we did when we corrected our true types in our text. So you can select all of those. And again, you can go into properties. You can go into your connections tab. You can put in your trim at and then put in your locks. As far as our one-click conversions, again, you should be able to have a shape. Let me just draw another shape. So let's leave this alone, start a new page, or actually go back to that other page. So let's come over here again. So whatever you have selected on your screen. So this is selected. I can come over to the stitch type I want it to be, right click on that stitch type, and it should convert it. Now that being said, make sure you're not using your right click for something else. So for those of you who like to go in and change your right click to do other things like right click to generate stitches or right click to finish a segment, if you've changed that at all in your in your settings. A lot of times it's going to turn off the right-click menu in other places. Now with your steel corners, again, you'd have to go to your steel tab, and then you can turn on the auto corner. And again, it's going to come in here, and in this case, it capped these. I went in with the turtle and I applied it, but I applied it to this one. So when I brought up the word swim, no, there wasn't a recipe there. So I'd have to come in here, right click again, apply the style. So if you don't do it at the beginning, then you would have to come in and select each portion because it's not applying anything there. Does anyone have any Draw Fusion questions? I know we did Draw Fusion in our other class, but does anyone have any Draw Fusion questions they'd like to go over today? Something that maybe you came across when you were trying to use it? As of right now, it is not working with X8. It's X7. So it's X7, 2017, and 2018, I believe, are the three that it's working with right now. I don't know what the ETA or how Pulse is looking at some of the other Corel versions. Hopefully they are coming, but I don't know when. Does anyone have any other questions? Again, if you do have questions, please post them in the chat box. If you are done with your questions, you are always free to log off. Again, if you do have questions, please post them in the chat box. Again, we are recording the webinars. So again, by the end of the week, we should have the digitizing ones available for you. So you would be able to request them through support at the end of the week. Does anyone have any questions? Again, if you do have questions, please post them in the chat box. Again, make sure that you do download your materials. Again, the items that we're using here are in your materials section. So again, please make sure that you have downloaded those materials. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, you can get the Embroidery Essentials Part 1 and 2 through support right now. Those are done. So you can absolutely request those through a support ticket. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? If we don't have any questions, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I hope we see you on another webinar soon. Thank you.